On today's Snapshot, we will be highlighting a conversation I had with Dr. Greg Bottaro. He is a longtime friend, Catholic psychologist, and founder of the Catholic Psych Institute. We will be exploring how running a business from a Franciscan perspective can help you find happiness in this life. This is the Catholic Center Show. The first thing I want to talk about is responsibility. You are the first of three brothers, the oldest. Heavy is the crown on the head of the oldest, right? Heavy lies the crown. I know you feel a lot of responsibility for disseminating the truth of the Catholic faith. It's part of your mission for Catholic Psych. But you also feel a lot of responsibility for being a business owner. And I'm just wondering where you're at with that now. You and I have talked about it historically, but what's it like feeling responsible for people who are working for you?
Yeah, that's a huge kind of surprise that I didn't realize was going to happen in business and in professional life. So like I never really thought ahead about what I was getting myself involved with. Like I like think back to like when I was in grad school, what did I imagine life was going to look like 10 years from then or even 5 years from then? And it's a blank space. It's like I have no memory.
So 10 years ago, 12 years now? 11 years?
12, yeah, like 12 years, yeah.
So you were just thinking small private practice.
I can't even remember what I was thinking. I'm not even sure I was.
Yeah. I was just like, I need to make money because I got to eat.
I figured like eventually I'll figure that out, but I wasn't even like planning anything out.
Sure.
And I feel like that's probably part of what drives my sense of responsibility was not having things given to me and having to figure a lot of things out for myself.
Sure.
And, you know, we could go back to childhood. We could talk about schooling, grad school. Like grad school is the same thing. It's like, you know, they were not giving us direction and, you know, planning professional services, planning out, you know, all those kinds of things.
Which is funny because that's a shift from undergraduate where they coddle you, and graduate school becomes sort of job training.
Yeah, I mean, my undergrad, they didn't really do that for me either. My undergrad experience was very similar.
Oh, okay.
And, you know, I think like high school, I go back to remembering like it's funny. There was a career counselor. What do they call them? I guess just guidance counselor. Guidance counselor.
Yeah.
So interesting story. I don't know if you talk about where you live in your podcast. I won't say where we are.
You could say generally Central Connecticut.
But my guidance counselor from high school lives in this town.
No kidding.
Yeah. And it's beloved, just a wonderful person.
Yeah.
And one of those characters in your schooling history that just left a mark.
Yeah, you don't forget him.
And you don't forget him. Yeah. And he was a history teacher. Yeah. He's famous in this town as a historian. And I know this place is it's
a historical
particularly
town. Yeah.
Historical. And he is just a great man. Anyways, I was thinking about him driving in today because just remembered, you know, and his guidance and his support, you know, he really takes an interest. But that was pretty rare in my years growing up and in schooling, and then in grad school, especially. There was a course, I think, on professional roles, you know, and that was,
sure,
you know, questionable value.
It was a tack on, I think, too. It's just like, it's like after hours. It wasn't part of the curriculum.
And it was like a 3-part even in the title. It was like consulting, professional roles, and something I forget. But there was never anything about like, what are you going to do with this degree when you finish?
Right. And I think part of that too is because you could do so many things with a degree in psychology.
Sure.
Yeah.
And that's, of course. And also, I mean, I think there were students who realized like halfway through the program that they couldn't even get a license in their home state with that particular degree. It's like
The program was being formulated.
it was a pilot.
Yes.
In a very long period.
We
of
learned
piloting.
how to launch pilots at Catholic
Exactly.
Psych from.
Exactly, which means that there's a bit of scrappiness involved. There's a bit
Yeah.
of startup culture involved.
Yeah.
And I thrive on that. But I recognize that not everybody else does. So, now I see in some ways parts of me resonating with where people are at. It's like, how are we supposed to do this? How are we supposed to do that?
Yeah.
Part of me gets frustrated when people act like that and ask those questions, because I had to go through the sort of,
You had no one to
hard
ask that
knocks.
question to.
I had no way to ask the
So
question.
you had to figure it out.
And I'd already developed the personality, to figure it out. So, but part of me also knows, like, okay, that's like the school of hard knocks. Like, you just figure it out. Like, you have to make it work.
Sure.
You have to fall on your face a bunch of times too. And then part of me is like compassionate toward not wanting other people to have to deal with that. So then it's like, all right, I went through the hard stuff first. I figured out a bunch of things that work, and I made a lot of mistakes that don't work. So I want to share that with people.
Well, here's a question I have. There must be a tension between wanting someone to figure it out themselves because of the value in that.
Right.
And also just, I remember how it was when I suffered and I had to figure it out.
Right.
So let me take that suffering away from you.
Right.
It's probably a balance.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a, and looking for ways that we've talked about this before, like this idea of being an intrapreneur, like within the safety and structure of something that's already established, but then also having the freedom to really, explore your own creativity and stretch out your own limits and all those kinds of things. I love providing that, because for me, it's kind of the both and it really does kind of answer that tension.
Slightly less risk.
It's less risk,
Yeah.
but it's like all the benefit.
Yeah.
And so you get to actually, and maybe you do still, I mean, you make mistakes and when you're figuring stuff out on your own, but
Sure.
it's not with the same sort of consequences on the line.
I mean, I'm ready for like one of the lights to go out right now, the sound to be out.
Yeah, there you go.
At any point in the middle of the recording.
Lawnmowers to
Yes.
drive by and
Yeah.
all this stuff. So
Yeah.
I think that's where a lot of my own drive comes from, for taking responsibility and like holding that for other people.
Yeah. Cool. Well, it's well documented that you had a history as a Franciscan friar.
Yeah.
I'm curious about how. Well, I maybe take a moment to talk about what it means to be Franciscan. We have people from all different beliefs and creeds and political persuasions watching this. When I think we need to unpack words sometimes that we frequently use. So you are a Franciscan friar. What is a Franciscan spirituality? And then as a follow-up, how does that affect you as a business owner?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So I think to just go super basic, Franciscans, like, people are typically familiar with Friar Tuck from Robin Hood.
Yes.
So we have that picture of a fat friar, shaved head,
Yes.
with what's called a tonsure,
Yes.
which is the hair that rims around the outside. And
I'm working on one of those.
Are you? We're sort of
Through, not
the
by
natural
choice.
progression of the tonsure.
Not by choice, but yes, I'm working on that.
Yeah, my barber told me in my last visit he's going to stop trimming so tight around the top. It's like, we're going to let this grow a little bit longer.
Cover over it. Yeah.
Like, okay,
Yeah.
I get you. I'm reading between the lines here. But, the spirituality developed as a result of a particular saint, a figure in history from the 12th and 13th century, Saint Francis of Assisi. He grew up in Italy, and he grew up into a very wealthy family. He was born into a wealthy family, and he wanted to be a knight. He wanted the glory of, what was sort of popular at the time.
His father was an entrepreneur.
His father was an entrepreneur.
Yes.
Definitely. He was a cloth merchant.
Yeah.
And done well.
Yeah.
And Francis was a romantic at heart, and he wanted to, go fight in the wars and have a lady that he longed to come home to, and all these kinds of things. And he was, long story short, just knocked off his horse, like St. Paul, and just had this incredible experience of what's most important in life, and he met Christ. And so he decided, instead of pursuing the world's riches and the world's romance and the world's sort of like the greatest and beautiful things of this world, he thought, like, what's even more beautiful than that? Well, the things of eternity, goes past time and space. And he was storing up his treasure in heaven. He's like, he knew what he was doing.
Yes.
He was still thinking about saving and storing up, but in a totally different way. So that's what he was pursuing. So today, his spirituality has come down through, there's these 3 what are called counsels or vows that a Franciscan would make, and this is similar to other forms of religious life, of poverty, chastity, and obedience.
See, this is my question.
Okay.
Poverty,
Right.
chastity, and obedience.
Right.
You're a business owner.
Yeah.
So you're obedient to no one. You're married. So someone questioned whether or not you're chaste. And you're also a business owner trying to make money.
Right.
So are you going to tell us the secret sauce of the book?
Yeah. So this this is my idea when I have some time.
Yeah.
It's basically how, going through the doors of poverty, chastity, and obedience, I unlock the secrets to living a happy, fulfilling life with authority and sexual intimacy and money.
And money.
So
very simply put, money.
Yeah, and money.
Yes.
And it's like, we don't have to, like, you look around and people are striving, seeking for more power, more sex, and more money, and never are satisfied.
I knew a friar once, and I don't know if he was the healthiest or most integrated of friars, but he described the vows as no funny, no money, no honey.
That's a good take on it. I think I heard it as no money, no honey, and a boss.
Oh, okay.
There was a slightly different one. But yeah, I mean, basically, it's a life of detachment.
Yeah.
That's the secret. And you realize that you can have happiness without any of those things. And it's real happiness. And that's what I miss about the life. It's like, it was so joyful in the simplicity that now it's actually a harder way to live, to have these things, because it's easy to just cut the cord completely and just remove yourself from these things that have an illusion of promising happiness.
Didn't Francis say that when the bishop tried to encourage him to own land?
Yeah,
it's
of
like,
course.
yeah, but if we own land, then I'd have to have an army to defend it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's like, if you start to have your, proclivities, your interests, if you start to like play into your own needs, it's like, we just live in this culture of like constant egotistical needs. It's like, well, I only eat this, or I only do that, or, only if it's a Tuesday, or if it's like, the more that we build around ourselves with our needs, the harder it is to defend. And that means that there's more and more things that are taken away, and then we are vulnerable to that sense of unhappiness.
Right.
So by stripping it all away, we
Yeah.
learn that you actually don't need any of those things
Yeah.
to be happy.
Yes.
And then it's like, okay, but can we use those things? Can they fulfill us in a sort of peripheral way? Can they add to our happiness? Sure.
Yes.
Of course.
Yes.
And I have great fulfillment over the responsibility that I have and the leadership that I get to step into, and that comes with a kind of, power, if you want to call it that. I have great pleasure in the intimacy of my marriage. I have great pleasure in the things that we can do with the money that we have and the resources that we have available. So when we realize that we don't need those things, then you can have them, and you have them with freedom and detachment, which means that actually it opens up different parts of the brain. This is something we teach with Catholic mindfulness. It's like, we're more creative,
Yeah.
and we can actually do more.
Yeah.
So we end up making more money. We end up having more fulfilling sex lives.
Yeah.
We end up having more authority and power that we have in our life.
Yeah.
And because we're not lording it over people and clinging to the money and grasping at the pleasures that we get that's owed to us.
Yeah.
It's like a totally different experience of life.
Yeah, you detach from it. There's in Chesterton's book on the life of Francis, I thought about this, what he describes about Francis and how it has applied to my life. He talked about how on a global scale, at least in Western culture, Francis offered a new take on the natural order. So prior to that, there was like paganism dominated, even though Christianity had been ushered into the Roman Empire for a while. Still, there was a lot of paganism and a lack of virtue, and paganism in the sense that like the natural order was deified, or even elements from nature were personified as people, and et cetera, et cetera. So Chesterton argues like the world needed the Dark Ages, that period of purification away from the natural order, which once completed allowed space for Francis to come in and baptize the natural order and talk about brother sun and sister moon from a Christian perspective and see them as creation reflecting the creator. In my own life, I think it's not just true of music, but specifically music. I used to deify music when I was younger. I used to look for wisdom and truth, and it created an emotional experience. Music creates an emotional experience in you. Art always does that. This is why I want to talk about a film with you later on. Art pulls, like it gets underneath your conscious mind and pulls up your unconscious, and you find this counterpoint in the art, and music especially. It's why we're in different, we want to listen to different music according to the current mood we're in. It's like a counterpoint for our interior experience. And so all of that, it just made the experience of music transcendent for me. But then I had a conversion to my faith, and I couldn't even listen to music for a while because I realized that it was empty, and it wouldn't actually satisfy me.
Yeah.
And I kept pursuing it and getting into specific bands and spending all my time thinking about music, and it just wasn't enough. And then I found my faith, and then I didn't listen to music for a long time, and then I came back to it. I had been purified, so now I listen to music very, very differently. It's going through that period of detachment. Now that I'm able to see that, like similar to Francis, I see the creation as signs of the creator.
What do you hear differently?
Well, I mean, one of the reasons I want to do this show is because I love exploring implicit Christ or implicit Christianity in the culture, and mining how people are looking for God even though they may not be looking for God, or expressing their love of him.
Yeah.
And so I see people's yearning for God, people's desires for the true, good, and the beautiful in music or in any art, in film, and anything. And I want to tease that out and help people to see, well, this is actually what you're after. Yeah, and I think for me, when I had my reversion of faith and became serious about being Catholic, the doors had opened and the light had shined on my soul and my life.
Yeah.
And I changed, and no one else did.
Yeah.
It was like I was expecting everyone else to be inspired and for their lives to change, but they didn't. And to this day, some of the people I love the most dearly aren't living a Catholic faith. And so the thing that I hate more than anything is cancel culture and not allowing anyone to even have a voice.
Right.
And this whole area of our society, which we could call the arts, is pretty antithetical to Catholic values nowadays, right? So I want to bridge the gap. I want to be able to have conversations with people who aren't explicitly Catholic or are anti-Catholic or whatever it is, so we can at least begin to talk and find touch points.
Well, I think that...
Yeah, I mean, some of the best people I know are not Catholic.
Yeah.
They just have natural virtue, and they're really good, well-intentioned people, and they haven't received the gift of faith, and that's where they are. And I don't want to be cut off from them because
Right.
I have a different worldview. I want to remain connected to them on a natural level, and from a Catholic perspective, I have hope that they come to believe at some point. But shutting the dialogue down isn't helping anybody.
Right. And this is an interesting thing. Like, I've, even in my own personal development, like, I've recognized, like, my friend groups are mostly Catholic. And then we've had a couple instances over the last couple of years where, moving into new places, and then you have kids who are friends with other kids, and then all of a sudden, you're getting introduced to these wider communities. And it had, like, for the first time, got to really know some non-Catholic people. And, in particular, these two friends that we had, and we since moved and have lost a little bit of touch with some of these people, but I had these moments of experience with for a couple years.
Yes.
One of them was pretty atheistic, and then another one was a bit agnostic, but still seeing like the beauty and goodness of a person, and
Sure.
and recognizing that we could connect. And it was kind of like exercising new muscles. You know, it's like, let's have conversation that goes deeper than what we normally talk about. You know, it's
Sure.
like just another sort of, you know, complain fest about, you know, some recent thing in the news about the Pope or whatever. It's like
Right.
normal.
Did you read National Catholic Register today?
Right, exactly. It's like normal Catholic conversation, dinner table conversation, but otherwise it's like actually not. It's